First, I would like to thank Ma'am Velma for that wonderful introduction. I could not have done anything better than that. Moving on. Before I start, I would like to give a small structure for my talk today, just so you can track it very easily. Today's talk is going to be more of a story, so you can sit back, relax, close your eyes, and just listen. It's a simple, yet extremely insightful, intriguing, and very, very interesting story. After that, I'll just give a small explanation on why this story is important in today's world and was supposed to be told on this stage today. Sounds good? All right, let's begin. Let me start with today's theme, samsara. What is samsara? Samsara is the circle of life. It's the circle of death, the circle of rebirth. Samsara is the never-ending philosophy of this universe. And as all of you know, a circle is not linear. It's not a segment that has a start or an end. A circle is continuous. Na adi hai, na ant. That is why we can't leave anything from the past behind. We can't leave those teachings, those stories, those morals behind, because we will end up using them in today's world to resolve modern problems. Going full circle, if you may. So today I'm here to tell a very similar story. A story which, even though is millions of years old, is still valid in today's world. Its teachings, its morals are still valid in today's world. A story which, even though consists of completely different people, we see that those people are bound together by a very thin, inconspicuous, almost invisible, yet undeniable thread. A story which is probably the only story in all Hindu heritage stories which involves every single being, from asuras to devas to insects to animals to humans. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to narrate the story of the Samudra Manthan, or the churning of the ocean of milk. So this story starts with a sage, but not just any sage, a rishi. And not just any rishi, a Maharishi, the most renowned rishi of the world, revered for his knowledge and feared for his anger. This story starts with the one and only Maharishi Durvasa. Maharishi Durvasa was sitting in a tranquil state, meditating in the meadow, when all of a sudden the breeze picked up and brought with it a scent of purity, a scent of freshness. A small little flower landed in the rishi's lap as he opened his eyes. The rishi, being the most learned of all, immediately realized the rarity and the importance of this flower. As he looked at it, the breeze picked up once more, and many more of the same flowers landed in his lap. He took them up and bundled them into a beautiful garland. A garland fit for a king, but not just any king. The king of the gods, Devraj Indra. Maharishi Durvasa traversed the lands, going to Devlok, which is Indra's abode. Once he reached there, he saw Indra resting atop his vehicle, a marble white and gargantuan elephant, Airavat. Now, you see, Indra was an extremely powerful deity, lord of the skies, the force of thunder, Mahavir Indra, the king of the gods. With such power comes great responsibility, but with it also comes arrogance. Indra was too full of himself. He didn't realize the importance and the essence of the gift, the prashada, which was given to him by the Maharishi. He thoughtlessly took the garland and wrapped it around his elephant Airavat's neck, not knowing that Airavat was actually allergic to the flower. Airavat, as any elephant or animal would do when you are allergic to something, shook his head and the garland fell to the ground, getting trampled under his foot. Maharishi Durvasa was enraged. As we know, he is famed for his anger, and this was seen as blatant disrespect from the god's end. Indra tried to apologize and make the situation better, but his rage had gotten the better of the rishi. He mustered up all his power and cursed Indra, cursed all the gods, all the devas alike, that from that day onwards, they would be stripped off of their immortality and taken away from their powers. They would be nothing more than mere manavs. Now, as we all know, for aeons, the Asuras and Devas had waged battle on each other, the classical representation of good versus evil. But now that the Devas were weak, they were vulnerable, the Asuras exploited that. The wars started becoming one-sided. Devlok was overrun, and the scale of cosmic balance was tipping towards the side of evil. Indra, Devraj Indra, knew that if this continued, the universe would crumble under the evil of the Asuras. He needed to find a solution. So he went to the only one who he could think of, somebody smart enough to overturn the curse of a Maharishi. The one, the only, his God, known by many names, Sri Hari, Narayan, Govind, Madhav, Keshav, the preserver of this universe, Sri Vishnu. So Indra traveled to Vaikuntha, which is Sri Vishnu's home. Once he reached there, he explained the entire situation. After some careful consideration, Sri Vishnu came up with a solution. He told Indra that the only way the Devas could get back their immortality and their powers was via Amrit. Amrit is a nectar of immortality, a mythical, forlorn nectar of immortality, as it did not exist then. Now, to Indra, the answer seemed simple, yet the problem hung obviously, ominously in the air. Vishnu smiled. He spoke. Indra, I assume you're thinking that if the Asuras are continuously attacking us, how will we receive Amrit? Because to get to Amrit, you had to take on a massive task of churning an entire ocean, of churning the ocean of milk. Indra, obviously understanding the problem, spoke back. Yes, my lord, how can we resolve this? So Vishnu smiled, a twinkle in his eyes. He said, well, isn't the answer obvious? Not just that the Asuras will attack us and we'll be distracted. Right now, the Devas aren't powerful enough to carry out such a massive task. So there's only one solution to it. The Asuras must help. Indra stood there, rooted in his spot. He was surprised. The Asuras help? His anger, his questioning became evident when he asked Vishnu, but my lord, why would those beasts ever help us? They would strike us down the first chance they get. Why would they help their own enemies get back immortality and power? Vishnu, the all-knowing preserver, smiled again. Indra, you see, it's not that the Asuras would want to help us, but it's because they would want to attain Amrit as well. For years, do you know the reason Asuras have resented us? Sure, they're powerful. They regenerate after a few centuries, but they do die. They never had the one thing that we Devas have, or rather had, immortality. So the Asuras will fight for the Samudra Manthan if they get Amrit in return as well. Go to their king, Mahabali. He's a benevolent leader and a devout follower of me. He will understand your proposition and help. Indra, not one to question his lord and the mystical ways he worked in, decided to go to Patal Lok the next day, the land of the demons. Mahabali, the king of the Asuras, thought over this for a while and agreed with Indra's proposition. Now the process was afoot. The Asuras had devoted their help to help in the churning of the ocean of milk. But you might imagine that churning an ocean is not an easy task to carry out. For that, they had to take some huge measures, quite literally. To churn an ocean, they decided to find the most portable stirrer they could, an entire mountain. Mount Mandara, now in present-day Bihar, was chosen. They uprooted the mountain and put it in the center of the ocean. Still, a small problem arose. There was no rope big enough to wrap itself around this behemoth of a mount. And even if they did find one, there was no rope strong enough to sustain being pulled from both ends by the most powerful beings in the universe. The problem obvious, the Devas came up with a solution and approached the only one they could think of who could remedy this problem. Nagraj Vasuki, the king of the snakes. You might know him as the snake popularly coiled around Lord Shiva's throat, which we'll be getting to pretty soon. Now that Vasuki was chosen, he was wrapped around the mountain. Each side started pulling, a humongous game of cosmic level tug of war, if you will. Now, the only problem arose that if two really strong beings are pulling from each end, the seabed was not powerful enough to preserve from this. It started crumbling. Because of that, the mountain started shifting. To remedy this problem, Sri Vishnu took it upon himself. He took his second out of 10 or Dasha avatars, also known as the Kurma avatar or the tortoise. He went down on the ocean bed, the mountain set upon his shell, and the churning began again. The churning went on for some time, and with it brought gifts. You might be familiar with a few of them. Dhanvantari, the god of medicine, the god of healing, came from the churning. Remember these names, we'll get back to them later. Dhanvantari, the god of medicine. Kamadhenu, the wish-granting cow. Goddess Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, all came from Samudra Manthan. So did so many other things, such as the Kalpvriksh, etc. But it's a law of the universe. Get to the greatest good, you need to fight through the greatest evil. And that evil showed itself right to the last. As soon as Amrit was about to be achieved, the water of the Samudra turned a greenish hue. It started bubbling, bubbling like acid. Now the Devas and Asuras knew immediately what this meant, and they fled from the scene. Because to be in such a because to even be in the proximity of such a dangerous thing was supposed to be a threat. Because to get to Amrit, they had to go through the most potent poison in the world, poison capable of killing a god, halahal. As panic spread in the air and people were frightened, the only one brave enough came forward, filled with valor, the omnipresent, the all-powerful, God of the gods, Mahadev Shiva. He knew that if he drank halahal, he would not be able to survive it. His life would come to an end. But he was willing to make that sacrifice for the betterment of the entire universe. In an act of selfless valor, as Devas and Asuras stood awestruck at this being so powerful, so selfless, he went up, picked the chalice of halahal, and drank it in one gulp. However, you might imagine that there are so many stories of Shiva we have heard later on. So how did Shiva survive this? As you all know, Shiva's wife, or Ma Parvati, is a form of Shakti Ma. In an act of love and devotion, she called onto the power of the universe and stopped the poison, the halahal, right in his throat, giving him the name Neelkant, or the blue-throated one. Finally, Amrit glimmered under the surface of water. Something shiny, something powerful. After a millennium of churning, after the toughest ordeal of their lives, they had finally achieved their purpose. Devas and Asuras, opposing forces, stood together, alike, hatred subdued, differences forgotten, united, together, one, by Amrit. What a story, right? So exhilarating, the plot twist, the single thread weaving it all together, so many new characters approaching, which we'll later see. However, you might be wondering, sure, this is a timeless piece of literature, but why was it necessary to narrate it on this stage today? Well, now's the time I come to explaining that. Agreed, a wonderful story, a beautiful plot. But it's so much more than that. It holds teachings, it holds morals, which can be used in today's world of international diplomacy. Sounds a bit far-fetched? Here, let me explain. Let's reimagine the Samudra Manthan, since it's fresh in your minds, and put it against the backdrop of the most infamous war of our times, the Second World War. Let's reimagine them, not as two different timelines or two different cultures, but as two twin reflections shadowing on the same fundamental truth, that from the deepest and hardest churnings come the greatest transformations. That for creation and for recreation, you need to drink the poison and churn your own souls. Okay? Sounds good? The sages said, it's 1939, the Great Depression has left economies to be fallen down. We have totalitarian regimes rising in the air. The world is in a very volatile state, ready to burst at any moment. This was the ocean of the world, a dark, silent, violent ocean. And then the powers materialize. Just like Mount Mandar was picked up and put in the middle of the ocean, we have ideologies, we have people, we have leaders, immovable, indestructible, standing in one place, stopping progress. However, there was something good that came out of it as well. Opposing factions, the Devas, the Asuras, who never agreed to come together on one thing, did come together. Capitalistic USA, communistic USSR did come together for a greater purpose, putting their differences aside. And then the churning began, not of milk, but of blood, of steel, of fire, the most violent churning this entire world had ever seen till today. What came first was not peace. Just as in the story, before getting to Amrit, we had to go through halahal. Well, this was the halahal of our world, the Holocaust, a systematic killing, genocide on an industrial level, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the humanity breaking out the atom and with it opening the gates to Patal Lok. And not last but not least, we had fire bombings, cultures scarred, rapes, killings, so much, the halahal of our time. And just like Lord Shiva had to drink halahal to save humanity from it, so did we. Not with divine bodies, but with our memories, with our minds, with our testimonies, with our culture. Just as his throat became blue from that day onwards as a memory of this halahal, so did ours. We remember, not to forget, but to engrave it in our minds. Because to truly move forward, we must appreciate and respect the memory of those who lost their lives in this process. But the churning didn't stop at poison. We did get some treasures as well. You might remember I mentioned Dhanavantri, the god of healing. Well, that came in our world in the form of the United Nations, the World Health Organization, bringing together different fractions from all over the world for one single purpose of medical welfare. You might remember Kamadhenu, the wish-granting cow. Well, that came in a wave of decolonization, starting from India, Indonesia, Ghana, countries finding their voice, finding their sovereignty after drinking this halahal. You might remember goddess Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth. Well, that came in the Marshall Plan, in the reconstruction of Europe. It came in the golden boom of America. So you see, when we went through the halahal, we paved our way to these treasures. But let us not romanticize. For every treasure we gained, something sacred was also lost. As the story reminds us, the ocean does not choose sides. It merely yields what was churned. And sometimes the bitterest of enemies need to come together to churn the ocean of the world. Now you might be wondering why I'm mentioning this today, right now. That's because the world is churning again. We have so many problems in the current era. We have polarization, we have new wars, we have climate change, we have the rise of artificial intelligence. What if this is our manthan? What if we are once more being called upon to come together, to unite as one, to find and fight this change, and to churn the ocean once and for all? What if the treasures that we crave, peace, innovation, unity, are just below the surface, just below the water, but we need to get through the poison first? So let us remember that the churning is painful, it is hard, it is desperate, but it is also sacred. Let us be the ones who hold the poisons in our throats so that the future generations can taste the nectar of immortality. Let us come together and churn once more, not for destruction, but for hope, for peace, for rebirth, for samsara. Thank you.